Our next one is, how do you and your partner split the rent? My partner, we aren't married, and I have 2 girls. He wants me to pay half the rent. He makes more than me, and I do all of the housework plus childcare. He is barely home. I don't feel like this is very fair because I'm left without anything. I'm almost done with school, so hopefully my income goes up. How do you and your partners split the rent? Now, I love all of these finance ones because it really just gives you a good insight into just the types of troubles and the mental gymnastics that people go through when it comes to money and what's fair and what's not fair. Honestly, I don't think that you can ever get to this point as, like, if you are living together and you have kids together, then just the fact that you try to aim to make everything 50-50 kind of really boggles my mind. And I mean everything, like in this case, everything is 50-50 only in terms of money from the husband's perspective, but actually everything else that the wife, that the partner does, that the mother does, is just not considered equally as important. I think this is terrible. I don't know how you can put a monetary value on things like housework, on things like childcare, and try to compare that to what someone else contributes to the house from the money side. I find this whole concept of how you try and split finances in a relationship super interesting, because I think most people come up with wildly different ways of approaching it. And it's great, so long as you can sit down and talk about it and agree on something, then that's fair enough. But what happens is that you end up with questions like this, where it's very, very clear that the dad, in this case, the boyfriend, does not value the work that she does from the childcare housework perspective anywhere near as much as he should, or he wouldn't be asking her to pay half the rent as well. Now, you'll see I'm just going to take a couple of examples. Obviously, my advice to OP would be that you need to, okay, I don't think it's fair. I don't think anyone would think it's fair. You need to figure out a different way of dealing with finances. What works for my marriage might not work for your situation, which is that we consider everything our money, and we don't have this thought of he's paying half and I'm paying half. It's like we're both paying the rent. Everything lands in one bucket, and from that bucket we pay whatever we need to, and that's all the thought that goes into it. So if you are not able to handle it that way because you want to keep everything separated, then it's your responsibility to come up with stuff. But yeah, no, it's a very good question. How do you value the other things that you do around the house that are not monetary when you're trying to deal with this kind of problem? Now, the first person says, same situation as me. I don't think it's fair at all. I still get annoyed, but I guess it is what it is. Some guys are stingy, I guess. I think that guys are stingy because we've arrived at this point as a society, to be honest. I think that guys have learned to be stingy, especially because we cohabitate for a long time before marriage. And so there isn't this idea of, hey, you're coming together. There's rather this idea of you're both living as roommates in the same house, and then that's all cool and comfortable, and splitting everything is fine. And I do think that this image of men as providers is one that's gotten a lot of negativity. It's not very appreciated and not very admired. And so that's kind of the outcome. The outcome is that some men are stingy because they do not want to provide. Or because they feel like providing is not fair, or because they have bought and really believe in this idea that, women are equally as capable, which they are. Of course, women are equally as capable when it comes to bringing the money in. But the question is it, like, does that make for a good relationship? And if you're always thinking about everything in terms of 50-50, I'm sure there are some women too. We had just the other day a woman who's scared about getting married because she's the one who brings in all the money, and she doesn't want to split her finances with her husband, with her potential husband in this case. So, everyone gets a little bit stingy about money when they feel like they have something to lose. And if you have that mindset in your relationship that you can't trust the other person with the money that you bring in, then it's not a very good relationship. I cannot imagine that it could ever end well. Now, OP has this. The one person says, do you pay for childcare? If so, then that should be deducted from your rent, because that 100% would not be fair. Otherwise, 50-50 for rent is what we used to do, but we used to split everything, even groceries. And this also completely boggles my mind. There was another thread that we read where they split not only rent, groceries, and so on, everything 50-50, but they also split all the child stuff. So everything in terms of diapers, bottles, clothes for the baby, and so on. They split truly everything 50-50. And I just cannot imagine how much time and energy in a day you waste by doing it this way. Like, it just seems so utterly exhausting. Obviously, it didn't take into account how much each person was earning. So it was like both were paying the same amount, irrespective of how much they're earning, which seems to me like you are just damaging your long-term prospects as a family when it comes to building wealth and being able to have a really good handle on your finances. So you also can't really afford to live at a higher living standard, even if one partner could, in theory, afford a much higher living standard, because you're paying the same into everything. And so the other person's living standard is the one that you kind of have to live by. It just seems terrible. It just seems very unfortunate. Now, OP replies to this. She says, right now I'm taking a break from school because I am beyond overwhelmed. I'm a couple of classes away from graduating, but lack support. Today's the third night in a row that he's gone all day long. By all day, I mean literally after the children go to sleep and myself. Sometimes, supposedly he is working, but I don't see that money. We are always broke. And so maybe actually her boyfriend has such a big problem with paying because he is struggling to bring in money. And that's where this issue comes from. But these are the questions, or the things that you would only really, the problems that you would only really notice if you properly sit down together. You look at your expenses, you look at your income, you decide, you budget, you figure out exactly how much is reasonable to be spending out every month. These are decisions that you have to make as a couple. And if you're treating everything as though it's separate and each person has to think by themselves, oh, okay, I need to pay $1,000 for rent this month, and the other person says, I need to pay $1,000 for rent this month, this is just not, like, it's just not, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand how people manage it. Then people have a whole bunch of suggestions about how she could do it. Maybe he can pay the full rent and you pay the utilities. There's one person here that goes into a ton of detail. They also split everything 50-50. She says the husband makes more than her, but he puts his extra money in savings so that they can buy a house. And then she says, I do probably 80% of the housework and 70% of the childcare. You could calculate what childcare would cost and deduct half of that amount from your rent contribution, saying, if I didn't provide free childcare, this is what it would cost. So I think you should contribute this amount extra towards our monthly expenses, as this is the work that I'm not getting paid for. And the underlying assumption is that you should be paid for looking after your own child from a childcare perspective. Like, and then this one is even more hilarious. She says, I would recommend you calculate your total bills, then your total income to find out what percentage is bills versus income. Then you each put towards the same percentage of your income towards the bills. So basically that each person pays, for example, 50%, 60%, 70% of their income, and then it's adjusted based on what they're earning, so it doesn't matter. My God, the headaches that people invent for themselves. I know that this is a personal thing. Everyone has their own way of how they deal with finances, and I'm not knocking anyone who chooses to do whatever works for them. I just truly, from my perspective, find it ridiculous and exhausting and fundamentally selfish. Like, to have this mindset about your finances, you have to always go in thinking, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And I do not want to share, even if I am sharing with my husband or with my wife, who I've decided to spend the rest of my life with, or with my partner, who I've been living with for the last 10 years. Like, it's just such a selfish perspective when it comes to handling finances. I hope everyone finds a way that works for their particular relationship, and that it actually works in the long term as well. If you want to spend all the time figuring out all the different ways in which each person contributes, then go for it.